Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday night live stream on the Reef Talk channel. Now, I'm going to just check in on my audio, which is working great, fantastic, because it was all funny last week and no one could hear me. So, right, hello, Shaun, first off. How are you, my friend?
I'm all good. Yeah, really excited to be back on here. And I'm not going to lie, I'm nervous again.
What is your mum in the chat like she was last time?
Not yet. No, not yet.
Oh,
but she probably will be.
Good stuff. We like the moral support. So for those of you who are watching who don't remember Shaun, so Shaun was on the live stream, I don't know, 3 months ago or something like that. And we tried to talk about a million subjects, and it turned out we needed about 7 hours to do that. So
literally, yeah.
Yeah, so Shaun, you run the Ocean Project in Dorset, which is a local fish shop down on the south coast. And you, what else was I going to say about you? Oh, yes. So your other nicknames, as you will see from the bottom of your screen, is Acro Man, and
That's
also
right.
Mr. Miyagi from the last live stream as well.
Yeah, Miyagi-san.
Miyagi-san, exactly right. And so, yeah, you kind of you're a bit of a stickhead. It's fair to say.
Yeah, I love the aquaporas. I don't know. Until you've had a go at it and until you've seen them with your eyes, I see customers all the time come in and they're fixated on LPS and all the wavy, really in your face, bright stuff. But it doesn't take them long. I give them a pair of the old orange glasses, and they're like, "Oh, hello." There's just something about it, isn't it?
It's funny because it's the way everyone starts. When I first started, there was a shop in London that just had some display tanks, and it had like a Clear Seal Reef Space 900, a 3-foot tank with a load of Zoas on them, and they were probably, if I looked at them now, I'd be like, But it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life. And like, if you show me like the fanciest tenuis in the world, like £2,000 for a 1-inch frag, I wouldn't have cared. Now I'm the exact opposite. So yeah, you kind of graduate onto acros and everyone ends up loving them.
I'll tell you what the other thing is, just sorry button in there,
yeah.
But would you have even known it was a £200,000 tenuis then?
I wouldn't have had a Scooby-Doo.
No, and actually I've actually got some tenuis, some quite nice ones growing in the farm, under 20k radium halides, and you look at them and you're like, might take that back to the shop and put them under LEDs again. It kind of but they don't have the same zing about them, unfortunately. But
no.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that one over the next sort of few months, and a little bit more sort of trial and experiments, I think, are needed.
Yeah, well, the problem with some fancy corals is they look amazing in the tank that you buy them when they're kept under the care of an expert, and then you put them in your tank, or I put them in my tank, having spent several £100s on them. Not that I spend that much money, but if I did, and then they just go green. So
yeah, so to be fair, that is quite a common sort of question, really, like people saying that their corals are going green or whatever, and that's why we're here, to give that advice, I guess.
Exactly. And there's one comment I'm just going to pin up and say Shaun is 6,500k.
Oh, literally, yeah.
Your orange.
I'm getting sunburn under here, Doug.
Yeah. So this is like you look a bit like Homer Simpson, actually, if I'm honest.
Yeah, sorry, we've had that conversation. I need to sort out some proper equipment for this, don't I?
Yeah. But anyway. So today you're going to be so the title of the live stream is how to set up a tank for SPS corals with Acro Man.
Yes.
So we'll kind of go into that, and you've got a few things you want to talk about. Before we do, though, there are some member questions that I wanted to ask you, that Hugo Tate wanted to ask you. And I think we said before, Hugo, right?
Yeah, he's been to the shop. He's a regular customer. Comes down. He loves his aquapora. Really nice guy, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying that he's got a semi-professional setup in his, I believe, in his parents' garden, which is actually naturally sunlit, quite like my forehead here. Yeah, and yeah, at the moment, I mean, I'm always excited when he comes in. I ask him how it's going, and obviously with the big temperatures we've just had, I'm no doubt he's had a few issues, but it's all part of the learning process, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't just turn the sun down in your app, can you?
No, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, so he's got a couple of questions, and one of them is a loaded question, And I think
Okay.
we said before, I think he knows. I think he knows the answer to this, Hugo. But you're
I hope
asking.
he's not trying to catch me out.
He's not. Well, I think he's trying to build you up actually. So the first question is: should we be nutrient loading our dead rocks before starting a new system? Which I think is a reference to your souping method.
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is yes. Yeah, we've got it. We've got it all here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I think realistically, if we could maximise, or should I say minimise, the amount of pests and unwanted algae we get from live rock, we would probably all still be using uncured, buy a box of 20 kilos of live rock, and you go through the horrible, nutrient out of control stage. And actually, I think that's really what we try and replicate when I sort of do the soup method. Just a bit more controlled. So yeah, we'll cover actually my souping methods briefly. A little bit later. So I think right. Short answer for that is yes, we should be nutrient loading our systems, whether you've got biological bricks in your sump and, just to activate everything.
So actually, I bought all the. So you recommend this souping sort of method, and I bought all the stuff off you to do that for my Fluval Evo. I've not done it. I've got some copepods arriving this week, and I'll do it then. He's posted another question as well, and there are a lot of words that I don't understand. So I'm going to read the question, and then after that, I'm going to read out what I think he's actually asking. So the question is: do
we get subtitles?
You do, yeah, basically, yeah. So Hugo, you're too clever for me, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But the question is, Hugo, from Hugo, aside from abiotic parameters, why do younger systems struggle to keep acros? Is it possible that microfauna, their larvae and bacteria, are the missing nutrient vectors in newer systems? So the code of that question is, why are younger systems struggling with acros?
Yeah, that's a good use of words there, Hugo. And just you wait, because I'm going to invite you on one of these videos one day. But yeah, I mean, realistically, that's in my mind a fairly easy one to kind of answer. And I honestly believe that if you can get a few parameters correct and stable in your new aquarium, then you can keep SPS. But I think realistically in the early stages, for me personally, it all boils down to nutrients. So keeping those nutrients at an elevated level. As we all know, I like to keep my nutrients up, quite high, really, compared to the old sort of style of keeping reef tanks. But
you like phosphate of 0.1 and nitrates of what, 10-ish?
At least, yeah. And I struggle to do that. The corals are hungry. I have a very minimal amount of. I'm looking over there because I can see my sump. I've got a minimal amount of rock for 4,000 litres, probably, I don't know, 60 kilos of real reef rock. Mm-hmm. No live rock has been in one. In the early stages, I think you actually bought some of my my live rock that I had. But it's only got 60 kilos in the sump. Obviously, in the shop environment, I can't have rock in the display tanks, although I have seen some American vendors doing it to pretty good effect. Looks quite nice. But yeah, I mean, realistically, my corals are what my nutrient export mode is, and they do it exceptionally well as long as they're in parameters that they like and can sort of deal with,
Fair enough. Well, we avoided the terms nutrient vectors and abiotic parameters in the
answer. I thought I did quite well there, actually, because I know what that means. I'm going to search it up, though, and I will get my data.
And Doug's with you on nutrient levels, and Doug runs a coral farm called Frag Farm as well. I did a video on them a couple of years ago. And there's one last question.
To visit there yet, but online looks really nice. So fair play, Doug. Well done, son.
Indeed. And before we get stuck into the stuff you wanted to talk about, there's one last comment from Dean Fielding. Does Shaun colour up under 6,500K?
I do. You stick a camera on me and I turn this lovely magenta-y kind of red colour.
There you go. What do you do with LEDs?
You don't want to see my growth.
Oh, God.
You love an innuendo.
I just wish I thought of it, that's all.
Yeah, that's true.
Moving swiftly on.
Yes.
So, Shaun, what do you want to tell everyone tonight about SPS and Acros?
I kind of wrote down this sheet, which last time obviously I waffled on for a lot, and I do that anyway. Anyone that knows me will probably understand that I just like to talk to people and educate people in any way I can. So, and this is purely my experiences, my knowledge that I've gained over the last 20 odd years. So a lot of it, admittedly, has kind of gone really upward bound over the last, say, 8 to 9 years, where there's this kind of change within the hobby. Everything's a lot more eco-friendly, and our knowledge is kind of, it's developing into a new age kind of recipe, or if you like, of how to set up a new age aquarium. So I basically wrote down some things. I know I'm not going to stick to it because I will go on to something else, but I'm going to start with basically what I think the right size aquarium is for an SPS tank. The dimensions, because that plays a part. So I'm not talking about necessarily how do you set up a tank to be successful for SPS. I know that my method works, and so do a lot of my customers know that. What I'm trying to educate is how to make an aesthetically pleasing tank as well as a successful one. So, an aquascape is very important, and the size of aquarium. So I would say that a minimum size aquarium for me, for a nice SPS reef, would be like a 3x2x2, which gives you that nice kind of the dimensions to be able to do, I think it's called the rule of thirds or aspect ratio, where you can have a focal point, my hands are over there, a focal point, and you can aquascape around that. And there's loads of people out there which are very talented at doing aquascapes, which do it as a hobby or a business even. But when you're setting up an aquarium for SPS, you kind of have to think ahead into the future. Right, I would like to keep a barley slimer, so being a big, leery, bright coral, maybe have that as your kind of your focal point, and have it at the tallest point perhaps. And as you go through the aquascape and come down through the layers, you might want to have table acros. So that plays a big part. I'm not going to sort of sit on it for too long, but
there's two things with what you've said in terms of the tank size. And so first off, 3x2x2. Most like waterbox or Red Sea tanks aren't that wide front to back, but some are. The XL Red Sea range are wider front to back, and I love that. Yeah. And the 2 feet front to back is massively important because you get nice sloping angles and all that, can't you?
That's right, yeah. And for me, again, not trying to stay on the aquascaping thing too much because, swiftly moving on. But when I do an aquascape, I actually aquascape from above. So a lot of people are fixated on what it looks like from the front. Well, ultimately, we're just creating a base in which to mount these corals, which are going to automatically on their own through nature are going to grow into a growth shape which is natural. So that's ultimately what's going to look good, is natural. So looking down from above, I'm looking to maximize surface area. So you might see like one of these geographic maps where you can see like heat spots and whatever going out. That kind of surface area is what I try and replicate. A little tip going down into like a pyramid going down into something, and then you have little bits jutting off, and that really does make a natural looking tank. And sorry, just quickly on that as well, is not to overload your tank with rock. Go for as much rock as what looks good in the aquarium, your aquascape, rather than I need 1 kilo per 10 litres. Just aquascape to what looks good. If you end up with 5-10 kilos, you need 5 or 10 kilos. One of my old customers, Lee, he had an absolutely incredible KZ run system, had 2 bits of real reef rock in like that. And I think he had over 30 colonies all coming off of that. It was incredible. So you don't need loads and loads of rock.
So that is really interesting. The idea of, and I'm just looking for a photo to show this, but the idea of aquascaping from above, that's brilliant. I really like that. And this is so I'm going to show a tank. This is from this is a tank that I know you aquascaped, and this is from another shop, Reef Dreams, down in Totton now, formerly in Winchester. And I know you aquascaped it because I saw you aquascape it back in the day. Let's zoom in a tiny bit. There we go. So this was a peninsula tank, and I loved the scape on this. It was proper peninsula, so you could walk around it. Did you do that then, like aquascape it from above with this?
I've got a disclaimer about that actually.
Mm-hmm.
The tank was never supposed to have SPS in it.
Oh really?
SPS is my thing, and I really wanted to do a softy and LPS display, as you could probably gather now with my water box tank down here. You know, it's just LPS. And I really wanted to explore what I could do with LPS corals. And, you know, Steve gave me the reins and he said, do whatever you want with it. We had a mound of real reef rock, you know, like, I don't know, 600-700 kilos of it. And I had a friend, Adi, with me, and I was saying, pass me another bit. And he was like, well, what shape do you want? I said, I don't care, because it's nature. I want you just to pass me a bit of rock and I'll make it work. And, you know, it was really interesting. I think realistically on there, you can't really see how intricate it was. No. But there was a lot of swim throughs where you can see, I think that looks like one of the pintails going through an arch underneath the digi on the top there. And underneath those plates, Monties there, there's actually 3 separate bommies, but the Monties fused it all together. So,
right, okay.
Yeah, that was enjoyable. I spent the best part of 4 hours sat inside that tank with a fan above me, cooling me down. It was quite warm in there.
Okay, oh, interesting. But I wanted to recreate that. But the problem I had was that I didn't have the luxury that you have of a box of rocks that I had to go and buy, 10 rocks, and that's what I had. But anyway, we're digressing. So so all right. So aquascaping 3x2x2 is a good size, and not too many rocks, but you need hiding spaces for fish and all that sort of stuff.
You do, you do. That is true, and you do need to be mindful of that. But like I said, having the forward thinking to try and sort of plan what your corals are going to do. I didn't know that tank of Reef Dreams was going to have Monties in it. I didn't know they were going to create a cave. So, I had in my mind that I needed lots of swim throughs. But so moving on to the physical sort of equipment, perhaps. Actually, no, I'll go back on one thing. The debate, to sand or not to sand.
Okay.
For me, I really like not using sand. I like a bare bottom. Just mainly for flow purposes more than anything, and there's no doubt 100%, I'll hold my hands up, your tank will mature quicker using sand, whether it's dead sand that's been activated with some frits or even live sand. You can get some like Nature's Ocean and all the rest of it, but they will mature quicker. There's a hell of a lot more surface area there for bacteria to colonize, but when you start getting, colonies growing this sort of size and you're having to turn multiple wave makers up, it soon turns into a snowstorm. So if you do want to have sand or gravel in your aquarium, I would personally, for an SPS tank, if you're setting up a tank just for SPS, I would go for maybe a 2 to 4 mil grade aragonite.
Okay.
Actually, one company, I think it's KZ, does one, which is like chips of aragonite. It might even be dolomite, actually. Whatever the material is, it kind of, the shapes of it is kind of wedges together. And once it's been in the aquarium for, say, 3 or 4 months, it kind of forms a crust, and it's really quite solid. And you can really turn the flow up.
Okay. Do you know what? There was a video recently, and I can't remember I don't think he said what sand he used, but this guy had, a reef bum had this massive chunk of sand that had completely solidified.
Yeah.
And it like you could smack someone over the head with it. But anyway.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting one, to be fair. I think That's kind of to do with anaerobic sort of breakdown, and low pH is actually melting the media together, possibly a little bit of precipitation as well, but it's something to be mindful of. And with no sand, I don't have that problem, so it's something I don't need to worry about. But
so you like a bare bottom, as it were, and in terms of it takes longer. How long are we talking? A year, 2 years?
No, not really. I mean, like, the whole shop here is conveniently in the next 2 weeks is coming up for a year old. So it's our systems here are, I would say, very well cycled and matured. They're very well, as stable as they can be for an operating shop system. But our water box display tank there is exactly the same age, and you look in there and it looks like a 5-year-old tank. There's coralline everywhere. You've got sponge growth growing everywhere. It just is so stable. It's unreal, and it's testament really to what my kind of recipe is, if you like. So moving on to let's say equipment, onto your SPS tank. We haven't even got to getting water in the tank yet. I knew this was going to happen. Flow is very, very important. I would definitely be looking to have, say, on this 3x2x2, sort of 2 MP40s or even 2 MP60s, depending on how into it you are. And as we discussed before we went live there, maybe you could swap those out for gyres. MaxSpec do them, Red Sea do them. We use them in the store here. They've got a unique flow pattern, very good for shifting a lot of water. Whereas the MP40s have got like a punch to them. They get into the rock and do penetrate inside the pores of the rock, which is very important. Lighting, minefields, whichever lighting you're realistically going to go for, just make sure you've got, as much coverage as you can go for. I would go for coverage over intensity all day long. I don't need to talk to you about lighting. You've had more lights than I have.
But in coverage, you mean, because you don't mean just like one light with a load of spread. You mean a ton of different lights creating natural proper spread.
I'll get shot for saying this probably, but I think it's becoming a known thing now. These companies bring out a light and they're, a 12-inch light, and they're like, this will do 4 foot. It will light a 4-foot tank, but it's only going to light a 4-foot tank if all the corals are, on one side and the other side shaded. So I'd rather have 3 or 4 lower wattage lights and spread them out, and allow the corals to get total coverage. I think we spoke about this before in the last live chat. It's kind of like that intense power on one side versus doing nothing on the other side, when the whole surface area could be doing a medium job and actually be less stressed from it all. So in my brain that makes sense anyway. And in the shop here we've got way too many on paper radians for the size tank, but you've seen for yourself, we do very well with our Acros. They get colour all round, there's no shading. Extreme health, really good.
So that you've got, how big's your tank your SPS tank in the shops? 8 feet?
Yeah, it's 8 foot by 3 foot.
And you've got 6 Radion XR30s?
Yeah, there's 6. They're Gen 5 Pro Radians on their XR30s, and I've got them kind of side by side, angled in ever so slightly, and when I first set them up, they were level, and to be honest, I was getting a bit of light spill because I have them so high.
Yeah, okay.
I thought I'll angle them in, and I did a few par meter readings just on blues. So all the channels, all the blues and the UVs running at 100%. I get 350 par every square inch in there with a slight hot spot down the middle, and obviously that's where I put all the real spicy ones. They get the trophy, So yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I couldn't have asked for anything better for my tank as far as a shop environment. Yes, I could ramp them up and get 700 par or whatever. it's not right for a shop environment for me.
So on this 3 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot tank, then what light would you say if you had no budget? Were you talking 2 XR30s? What are you talking for lighting?
I would actually go for 3 XR15s. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Because an XR30 does give out a tremendous amount of light, and the age-old people not liking to wear orange glasses. I mean, I love it. But a lot of people, yourself included, you love to have a white part of the spectrum, don't you?
Yeah.
You like that white part. You could light a 3 foot tank, no doubt, with 1 XR30 running SPS AB+. It'd have to be 15, 18 inches above the tank to get the spread, but it would do it. And the new Gen 6s, I believe they quote something silly like 4 foot. We'll come on to that later about something, but realistically, most people have the RMS rails or some sort of mounting option for their LED lights. And do you know what? If I didn't have the budget, I'd probably go for something like those lights you had, the IT Evergrows.
Evergrows. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your tank did all right on them. I mean, it's got enough blanket. I've seen some phenomenal. I think Ian Rodber, I think he's probably watching or in the comments somewhere.
Yeah.
He had, I don't know if he's still got it, but like a phenomenal tank running them.
His tank is the reason I went for Evergrows, because it just.
There you go.
Well, man, they just look so good. And actually, I look back at photos of my tank from time to time, and I love the Kessels, but this is how it looked, and I'll bring up. This is how it looked with the Evergrows, and that's about as good as it ever looked.
Yeah.
With a ton of spread. But anyway, all right, so you would have 3 XR. Oh, actually, the other thing I was going to say, there's a lot of love for T5s in the chat. ATI SunPower in particular. Are you talking about LEDs just because they give you more, other things as well, or are you a T5 fan?
To be honest, I'm trying to move forward, aren't I? I've always, as I said earlier, in my unit there, I've got a bit like a coral farm, and we've got halides, we've got ATI hybrids running. The corals do exceptionally well under those types of lighting, but let's be realistic. Electric is costing an absolute fortune, and I'm going to have to convert. I'm going to have to. And most people, realistically, if I put a T5 on the shelf, probably even a Stellar at best, the T5 hybrids, I might be able to sell one of those. Most people don't want to come in and buy an energy burner, do they? They want to come in and buy the most economical thing, and I've kind of got to keep up with that, I guess.
They're not sexy, are they? When I remember when you first set up, I came into your shop, I don't know, a couple of weeks in, and you were talking about doing a halide tank.
I'm still going to do that.
Are you still going to do it in the shop?
Yeah, the big 10 footer. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but that's probably going to be a winter project, and I'm planning on filming the process of the whole build, and just kind of documenting it more for my own, show people, this is what you can do, sort of thing. This is what we can do, and I just think it'll be fun to do it, to be honest.
Very interesting, and you were quite right. Ian Rodber is in, and he says thank you about his tank. Anyway, so that's you'd have 3 XR15s on this hypothetical 3x2x2 Acro tank, right?
Absolutely. So I'm going to try and move on now to actually filling this tank up with water.
Half an hour in and no water yet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So basically. Obviously, your chosen type of salt. I would always aim for natural seawater levels, as we've discussed before. And for me, something like Tropic Marine Pro or the Red Sea Blue Bucket is ideal. It's a perfect starting point. You don't want to have increased, elements at this stage or at all in my experience. But the most important thing at this stage is to actually just stick to the basics. Classic. Make sure your salinity is correct. And I'm going to keep saying that because it sounds really, really obvious, but genuinely every day I get somebody in that has a problem with salinity, and they've got a testing pen or they've got a salinity probe or what have you, and I said, bring a sample of water in, check the salinity, and it's way off. And that's with a refractometer. So, you know, I calibrate mine, you know, very regularly. And it's always a reoccurring theme. So day one, assuming we've used some dry rock, we're going to then go in with some bacteria to start off our cycling process.
Okay.
And you know, there's loads of products out there. I've got a few different types here, which are kind of little things to put aside. We use and recommend the Fritz stuff here. It's not a plug particularly. I mean, I've used Cycle before to great effect, and I've even used the TMC nitrobiotic. We actually matured our fish system with this one.
Is that just nitrifying bacteria?
Yeah, it's got probiotics in it as well. It smells,
so that's the same as ADM Colony and Dr. Tim's and all that?
No, it's a weird one.
It's
it kind of, I think it's based on yeast, and you know, it smells like hops, you know, like that beery sort of smell. Yeah, I mean, it just works. It's really good stuff, and also an ingredient of my soup mixture as well. But it's very important, as Hugo sort of pointed out or was implying, the early stages of setting up an SPS tank, or actually any tank, for me is about getting as much nutrients in there as possible. And rightly or wrongly, I think you need to really ramp up the speed in which you add fish into the aquarium, because you do end up initially with, you know, spikes of whatever. Ammonia is very rare that you get a spike unless you overfeed, but you know, one of these will save you endless time testing. You know, they're not accurate, but they give you an indication. And for those of you maybe not noticing or haven't got time to test every day for ammonia, or from twice a day, certainly on our quarantine systems, we have these on every single tank in our quarantine facility, and it saves us serious amounts of time and serious amounts of not killing fish.
You know, I think they're. I use on my fluval. I use that. I didn't talk about it much, but I think that's better than testing ammonia, because you see it. If you test ammonia, you'll get lazy and you might test it every other day. With that, you might look at it 5 times a day. I think that's better.
It's a visual indicator. It's just like anything else. If you've got a digital temperature reader on your aquarium, you walk past subconsciously 25.2. It's logged, and you know what that is. It's something not to worry about. And yeah, I mean, I use them all the time. I've always got stock of them. You just really rate them, to be honest. So anyway. Bacteria in. Oh, this is going to go extremely well, I can tell. Okay, so 3-foot tank. I mean, I'm going to base it on a 3-foot tank. On the first initial stages of stocking with fish, I would go straight in with 6 fish, like small fish, probably damsels, not going to lie, I like damsels. But you could go for like Royal Grammar, some easy to keep fish, and I'd assume that you kind of know a few easy to keep fish by now.
Which damsels?
All of them.
Really?
Yeah, not going to lie. Yeah, I've got some real horrible ones over in the unit, which I got told off for buying by Ryan. He hated it. But, you know, I like them. You know, they are the most, if they're not, they are very close to being the most abundant species in the ocean. I love them. You know, they live in and around these corals every day. Most of them have got a purpose, including biting fingers. But, you know, they're there, and they are very cheap to buy. They're hardy. You know, some of the species eat pests, which, you know, is another conversation entirely. But yeah, they're just really good for nutrient loading. I'm going to use that throughout this whole thing.
Okay.
Thanks, you.
I like it.
So yeah, you've got your first lot of fish in now, and you've dosed your initial stage of your instant cycle, we'll call it that, whichever brand you want to use. You then leave it for a week, just feeding as per the routine. Realistically, most of those bacteria recommend to leave your skimmer off for 4 days. I'd go ahead and leave it off for the first week or even 2 weeks, to be honest. Yeah, once you kind of get up to your sort of second week, you've got a couple of different options, and I would always choose the natural route by adding more fish. more fish means that you're going to have to feed more, and you would subsequently raise your nutrients. And we need to be paying particularly attention to your ammonia, nitrite and nitrate. You want to see some sort of cycle. I'm not saying you should see a huge ammonia spike. Sometimes you may do. And if that's the case, you just smack another load of that in and stop feeding your fish for a couple of days, realistically, and that will sort it out. But phosphates and nitrates. So the initial sort of nutrient loading, you want to aim to bring up your nitrates and phosphates significantly. And if they go like really high, don't worry about it. You know, if I tested my fish system now, the phosphates would be like, test kit would blow up. You know, but the nitrates and phosphates want to be elevated 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, whatever. Nitrates
in a new system, is that just going to give you a ton of algae?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course it is.
Okay, but that's a good thing.
But yeah, I mean, all you're doing is you're being in control of that situation. You know, you're encouraging algae to grow, and then you're going to add in animals, herbivorous fish, snails, you know, hermit crabs, if you like that sort of thing, and you're going to let them mow it down, which will in turn release those nutrients, and the cycle starts again. You know, that sort of second and third week, the actual cycling stage of the aquarium, as far as I'm concerned, done. Nitrification is taking place. We're now kind of fixing on, right, let's actually get some diversity going on in here. And when you buy a turbo snail, it will have coralline algae on its shell, and it might have a little tiny bit of hair algae or diatom algae, and that will seed your aquarium. Yes, there's things to look out for when it comes to that, and you don't want to introduce Valonia or, you know, bubble algae or Bryopsis, something like that, and that's just visual checks, or buying quarantine stock. But yeah, increasing those nutrients for the first, you know, realistically, the first 3 or 4 weeks is massively important. And I would say after you've added your second batch of fish, roughly 2 to 3 weeks in, for most people, that's when I normally get a phone call to say, "Oh, my tank's turning brown," and it's like, brilliant, it's progressing. Now it's time to add in some copepods, and you kind of seed it with various cultures. You can get different strains. To be honest, I don't really know the difference between them. Add them all in. Why not? You know, if you can get different strains, then add it into the mix. And they're going to keep down the diatomaceous algae and the microalgae and just help the cycle, the maturation process begin.
So I think there's, I've just bought from reefphyto.com or .co.uk. They've got, I can't remember what type of copepods, but I think the difference is they're benthic. So they don't just, like the stuff you get in the tubes, my understanding is they're less likely to stick to the rocks and the sand. I might just be being sold, upsold by marketing here, but
possibly. I mean, as much as I like to have the banter about this natural seawater lark, I actually have got a customer who had like this incredible infestation of copepods in this little tank.
Oh, really? Cool.
And I think they were from the beach, like genuinely. Oh, right. And I had them for ages, and I was growing them and selling them to customers.
In the UK, they're from British South. Yeah. God, I wouldn't have thought they'd like the temperature.
As soon as that heat wave came, they all died. So I'm out of pods, unfortunately.
Right. Because the water must be about 10 degrees in the UK most of the year. Anyway.
Yeah, if that. But yeah, I mean, they bred, and I've been using them to great effect here. Realistically, so just kind of looking over my sort of my checklist, if you like. But sort of week 3, you're probably going to be expecting to come in and buy, in my opinion, a large number of cleanup crew. I would feel, nothing by putting 50 turbo snails straight in that aquarium, especially if you've got a serious outbreak of something like hair algae. It's not a problem, something will eat it. And as long as you get the right numbers right, or the right numbers of the cleanup crew, you can manage any outbreaks that do come along.
Do you know what? I'm really glad you've said 50 turbo snails, because I think a lot of people will buy 2 or 3 and go low. I don't
exactly.
think I don't think I'd have gone as high as 50, but I like having a ton. So that's key for you reckon?
Well, I actually know from our stock take that there's over 400 turbo snails in our peninsula, and that's a 5 foot tank.
Okay.
You know, yes,
400 in a
yes,
5 foot. Okay.
yeah, there's mental. It's crazy, but
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't do much algae cleaning anymore. Thanks, Ryan. But that tank genuinely will go 5-6 days without needing a glass cleaning. But there's always snails on the glass, like they are everywhere. Doesn't make for very good photography, but you know,
Just
biologically,
bash them off with the algae scraper.
yeah, you knock them all down. Yeah, so having the right type of cleanup crew, again, thinking forward, things like emerald crabs are really good for invasive algae like Valonia, hair algae, some of the little sort of like brown kelps you get that kind of crust over the rock.
Yeah, okay.
Some calcareous algae as well, they'll peel those off. Abalones, if you can get good ones, they're quite susceptible to salinity changes, so really like take your time with acclimating those. But they are ugly, like really disgusting.
I don't think I've ever seen one of those in the UK. Do you get them?
Yeah, we get them regularly. I mean, I buy them. They disappear because they are so camouflaged. They are incredibly ugly. You know, I won't say what they look like turned upside down, but they look like a bit like yeah, they so
They look
yeah,
like
that's
this
it.
guy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and you know, you can get small ones, maybe an inch long on the shell. I believe it might be where mother of pearl comes from. Might be rubbish, but like the shell on the inside is really beautiful. But yeah, they're really good algae grazers. Sea urchins are like absolute godsends.
Yeah.
So
Which urchins? Anything?
I love using with TMC call them spineless urchins, but tuxedos.
Yeah.
They can be a bit of a pain. They pick things up, wear them as hats and whatever else. But the work that they do is phenomenal. You can get some really cool ones as well. Yeah, stomatellas, fantastic, and free as well. Normally, so you know, having the right cleanup crew is very important, and fish choice as well. So always try and have like a little bit of a tang gang. I know you're probably going to get shot down for saying this. And
in a 3 foot tank.
Tang.
How many tangs? 10?
I've had 2 in a 3 foot tank. I've actually had a lot more than that, but I'm going to advise 2. Convict tangs, absolute.
Oh really? Convict?
Yeah, convict tangs are amazing. You know, they don't grow too big, very active, constantly grazing, not too aggressive as well. One of the zebrasomas, maybe a brown scopaz or a yellow tang, you know, something like that. Very good for picking. Bristletooth, so gold rush tang or timini, blue eye tang, yeah, anything that's got that kind of classic, lovely fish, a whitetail. They're very good for eating sort of diatomaceous algae, the sort of the slimy sort of algae you get. And obviously, you know, by eating those those algae, they're going to be releasing those nutrients back into the water column again as well. So I would say week 5. Let's assume that you've got to week 5. You've had a bit of an algae bloom, and you've kind of you've got a level of cleanup crew in there, and your nutrients are elevated up to say 0.12 on the phosphate, so your nitrates are 15 or something like that. Your protein skimmers run in, and you're getting a real thick green, brown, smelly goo coming out of there. That's the good stuff. We're now realistically needing to kind of assess whether our tank is ready to accept some testicorals. So, you know, easy to keep species like stylo, Psiloporas, some Montes as well. But before we actually go ahead and go to the local fish shop and actually purchase some, I think it's probably a good idea to send one of these off.
Oh, really?
And just assess what's happening, because through the cycling stage, we're basically inviting a massive party of loads of different microorganisms to have reign of whatever they want to do. And all bacteria, all algae, they consume trace elements, whether it be potassium or iodine, manganese, that type of thing. And actually, during nitrification, alkalinity can be depleted as well, which is something for you fish-only keepers. Check your alkalinity, because I guarantee you it goes down a lot quicker than you think it does. And that's just through the process of breaking down ammonia. So, yeah, you send off your ICP, and all we're really doing is checking how depleted we're getting on, say, iodine or manganese, but we're also checking to make sure there's no contaminants in there. We don't want any zinc, we don't want any tin. We want our silicates to be in a reasonable range, and just to make sure that we're not going to knowingly put corals into a less than ideal sort of environment. And you know, that takes, say, 3 or 4 days to turn around, and you won't be scratching your head. You'll be right. I know my water is these parameters, and by all means, if you want to send your ICPs to me, which a lot of people do, it gives me actually an indication of what the trends are within the hobby. You know, there's a lot of silicate talk going on around at the moment, and it's believed to be due to farmers' runoff, you know, from farmers' fields.
Right. Okay.
And you know, it's something which a lot of people are struggling with, sort of diatom blooms this time of year. And it's kind of like, is it the temperatures? Is it over lighting? You know, whatever. So going on to.
I'll just pause on there, because I never would have thought to send off an ICP test that early when you got a load of corals in. Yeah, of course, but it's interesting that the other things that consume trace elements that you don't think about, or most people wouldn't think about.
The way I see it is, you're going to spend 30 quid on an ICP and you're going to spend 20 quid on some frags. I'd rather spend 30 quid on an ICP knowing that the frags are going into the best quality environment, you know, an acceptable environment, rather than putting the frags in, they die, then I send one of those off, and then go and have to buy some more frags when I've sorted the problem out. So I guess prevention is always better than cure, obviously, but you know, that's just going to identify whether you've got, for argument's sake, some little granules of metal in your sand that you've bought, which does happen. You know, you should run magnets through any sand, whether it's wet or dry. You should try and remove as many metals as possible, because I don't know how it gets in there, probably through the, I don't know, what do they do, mill it or whatever, processing
sand most of the time, I would say.
Yeah. So
I've had that. I've found bits of spiky metal, ferrous metal that sticks to a magnet in sand before. Yeah, it's there. It's real.
You know, I don't know how bad that is. I mean, one of my most successful tanks had a fully rusted down Jubilee clip in the sump, and it had been there for years. This was before I even knew what an ICP was. I mean, my corals were fine, but you know, if it's just iron and maybe a little bit of zinc, I mean, we know corals use that.
There's a guy I saw, I can't remember where I saw it, but he had an iron bar basically in his tank that he was growing corals off, and it was rusting, but I guess it was just giving off iron or whatever. And I saw that, I thought, what the hell are you doing? Because whenever I've had things like zinc, tin, and other things like that in my tank, the corals are dying.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know if it's the purity of the metal then.
I don't know. I mean, when we testing for the ICP, we're actually testing for what's actually in the water. But what if the corals taken out before you sent that test off?
Yeah, okay.
You know, it could have been really high. I mean, you know, you can get high levels of iron if you over fluidize rower phos. I know that is actually a massive benefit to a lot of reef tanks. Iron's often depleted very quickly, but yeah, I don't know. You know, it's one of those things. It's kind of better to be safe than sorry, I guess.
I've got one more suggestion for filtration, and that's a clam. What do you think?
Yeah. Actually, I would agree with that. Yes, and that as well. So I was going to suggest, actually, there was a chap that, I can't remember if it was an Ultimate Reef, going years back now. We actually got some eating, I believe they were clams or oysters, and actually had a sump full of those, and he'd actually worked out a flow rate that each clam could actually filter per hour, and actually came up with this formula for it. So it's quite incredible.
Cool. All right. And just one last question as well. There's someone who's popped up in the chat to say hello, who I'm just going to go back to. I don't know if you know him. His name's Andrew Sandler. Do you know Andrew Sandler?
Yes. Well, I don't know him personally.
But you know of him. He's got the
I know that he has got possibly the most incredible. It's not a tank. It's a. What would you class? Is it indoor swimming pool?
A mini ocean, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. Like, hats off to you. That is incredible. Like, even the quarantine system is like, oh, give me that, give it. Like, just that much of it, you know. Amazing. Yeah. Truly spectacular.
Anyway, back on topic.
Yes. So we're at the stage, we've got our ICP back, and we've got the green light, and we're going to start looking for some easy to keep frags. And I'm going to say actually that buying frags is always going to be the best starting point for a couple of reasons. One is that they're often cheaper. Don't go out and buy the newest crazy whatever. Stick to something nice and easy. Birds' nests, you know, the Ceratoporas, Stylos, Bacilloporas, Montes, loads of different varieties, loads of different shapes. And there's actually some pretty unique looking ones that are really hardy. So if you've got friends within the hobby, pinch a frag. A frag that's been grown in an aquarium is always going to be hardier than a frag that's come just from the ocean or a mariculture piece. And there's so many people out there, and believe it or not, and genuinely they do this. And if you are one of these people, you should be ashamed. They throw overgrowth of algae, of Montes and Stylos. They throw them in the bin.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Why are you doing that? You know, one of the main corals that we sell are the cheap £10 frags. Corals that come in and people buy, and I know 100% those corals are going to do well, you know, and it's a coral that's so common that people, shops in general, don't really buy them from suppliers anymore, because we know somebody's going to turn up, Mark Bromby, with a bucket full of, you know, oh, I've grown this month, and it's like, yeah, okay, more Stylo, more Montes. But that's the type of corals that get people into the SPS game. You know, they want to have, and they need to have success. Because if you put a coral in there, a piece of whatever Miyagi Tor or something like that, and it strips from the base, and you get disheartened, you're not going to have a go again. And that's not what I want to do. I want to have the ongoing succession of people coming in every week. Oh my God, my corals started to base out now. What do I do now? And when should I start dosing and progressing on to the next thing? And that for me is what I love about this hobby. You know, is that progression and the want for people to succeed and keep succeeding. They want to do it. Yes, hardy frags. I would say from week 5, which is when I would say probably you'll be good to go with some hardy tester frags, I would be 100% fixated on alkalinity consumption, some nitrates. So trying to aim to keep them stable. Don't worry if they're really high, say 0.3, 0.4 for your phosphates. Your corals probably will go brown. Don't worry, brown coral isn't going to die. If they go white, then they are potentially going to die, or might even be dead. Nitrates, the number one thing with the nitrates, do not let that value go to 0. If you do that, you're going to end up with horrendous issues. To be fair, if either your phosphates or nitrates go to 0, you're going to either end up with a situation with very, very, very pale corals, unhealthy corals, but also the dreaded dinoflagellates. And, you know, that's just a horrible path to go down. Don't get me wrong, you can solve it, but you really don't want to get that in your tank, because your cleanup crew starts dying and your house stinks. You know, you don't want that. Keep luscious growth on algae. nice green, fast-growing algae, bit of hair algae, and just keep adding herbivorous animals until they keep it under control. After a certain amount of time, and I can't actually say because it depends on what stage you added cleanup crew and what have you, you will start seeing little specks of coralline algae, and this is a really, really positive sign. Normally you would see it on wave makers, on the guards. Any high flow areas, you'll see coralline algae starting to build up and grow, and that is a telltale sign that it's time to add some, stony corals, basically.
Why are you adding corals so early? Is there a purpose, or is it just to see how the corals get on, or are you bringing in extra bacteria, that sort of stuff?
See, there's two answers to this question.
Okay.
There's business owner answers to this question, and there's also the fact that everybody, and I mean everybody, is impatient.
Yeah.
I had acros in our system there after 2 weeks, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day. I don't actually think my acros ever looked as colourful as they did in those first few weeks.
Right, okay.
And I genuinely believe it's because the corals went into a system where the salt water was so new, they had every single trace element they could need. The ones that even the ICP, they can't pick up. There's 72 trace elements in salt water, and we're testing for what? SAPs 30 on there, something like that.
Right. Okay.
Those corals were fluffy. They were growing really fast. They were really an observation which nobody seems to be able to articulate is what healthy acroporous skin looks like. It's kind of fleshy, puffy, not thin.
Yeah. You know it when you see it, don't you? It's hard to describe.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, it's got a texture to it. It's strange. What was the
reason I asked that question? It was why you put corals in early, because I do, but I don't tell other people to do so. I do it because I know they're probably not going to die, but they don't bloody like it. So I think for beginners, it's not ideal to add corals early. But I wanted to know why.
This video was kind of aimed towards setting up an SPS tank, and I think realistically. Anybody that genuinely wants to set up an SPS only tank, and I have got a few people that we've done that for, they've already been in the hobby and they kind of want to go, right, I want to do this properly. Yeah. And in an ideal world, as I said before, we'd all set our tanks up with live rock and we'd cook them with halides, and we would only put LEDs on them when we wanted to put the orange glasses on and all the rest of it. But genuinely doing this method at the 5 week mark, you will easily be able to keep Psiloporas, Stylos, Ceratophoras, no doubt. As long as you keep those nutrients up, you can. And there is bacterias, and the microbiology of the tank has a massive part to that. And I really do feel that my soup method just massively enhances that. For realistically, you're looking at a coral that is potentially in a stressed environment. In those early stages, you're gonna have cock-ups, you're gonna have swings and whatever else. And those types of corals that we've had for 8-10 years, sometimes longer, they're accustomed to that. We were talking about pH and alkalinity swings before this live chat. Do anyone actually really know the actual effects of these things? I don't know. I was quite interested to watch your calc slurry video, and they sort of seem to really focus on pH rather than alkalinity. And again, if this is a video based on SPS setup, then realistically I should be telling everybody to have an aquarium monitor so we can test pH and we can keep alkalinity as stable as possible. Is it essential? No, it's not. If you know what you're looking for, you can do it blind almost, so to speak. So you've got some nice, easy to keep frags in there now, and you're starting to experience a drop in alkalinity and calcium. And I would say that you probably after maybe 2 weeks of you adding those corals in, you would either have seen a colour change or something significantly would have changed about those corals. Either they've really coloured up, which sometimes does happen. Montes, plate Montes in particular, they can often be grown, and as much as I hate to admit it, in the shop environment, they tend to get pushed to corners because they haven't really got pride of place, and they're often in a little bit less light or a little bit less favourable conditions. And those types of corals, to somebody just starting out, are going to be the greatest thing ever. You know, that's really exciting. They've got their Monty, they've got something that's going to do really well in their aquarium. And I would expect something like that to take a really vibrant coloration and get the best out of it, because they're going to give it what it needs. They're going to pay it 100% attention. And what we're realistically looking for is, the coral physically laying down its calcium skeleton onto the rock. We call it basing out. Visible growth, so it's actually increasing in mass. And also one really visual bit is polyp extension. So we're looking for those polyps to be extended. Some corals a lot more than others. Some of the Seriatoporas are really like bushy. Some Montes have very, very small polyps. But it's all about observation at this stage and looking at what's the right time to actually progress on to something a little bit more sensitive.
Can I ask you a question at this point? And you might be coming onto this. Are you planning on doing water changes on this system? And if so, when do you do your first? When do you start?
Yeah, so you're looking at realistically around the first month. So you could set a tank up, and again, two-sided argument. You might never want to do a water change if you want to use something like the Triton method, but you don't have to run the Triton method to not do water changes. I'm a fond believer that doing actually big water changes is quite important. More really for the trace elements that I can't test for. As you probably know, I use the TMC reef salt, and historically used that for years, both here and at Refugiums, and really good success. It's not perfect, you can look on the bucket. You've got quite elevated levels of magnesium, 450, 460 calcium, and your alkalinity 8 to 8.5. But for a shop environment where I actually don't really want to be spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds on bottles, I've got 4,000 litres, don't forget, for one system, and that's a hell of a lot of trace elements when you have to start bumping things up. So water change for me is the easiest way. Plus, a litre of water per bag as I'm bagging up everybody's lovely stock. I'm doing 100 litres a day, on average. So, for me, it's almost impossible to do the no water change thing. But water changes for me on an early stage tank, dry rock, 1 month onwards, unless you're experiencing problems in the beginning stages, maybe there is a contaminant, but we're looking for that sort of, from that ICP onwards, you can do water changes, or you can decide to not do water changes, but I would personally recommend water changes.
And are you doing water changes because of trace elements or because of other things as well?
I actually don't like, at the moment, I don't like doing a water change because it drops my nutrients too much. So I'm at the moment, if it wasn't for the fact of, NIOS bringing out 2 products, I know there's various different ones, but NIOS for me is like, they brought out Phosphate Plus and Nitrate Plus. Yeah. And it's so easy to work the maths out. I'm crap at maths, really rubbish with maths. But I know that I need to put so much in my tank. And, I'm basically adding, say, 30 mils of nitrate every day, just to try and maintain it anywhere above 5. And it's really difficult for me to gain it to 10 without sort of overdoing and ruining my sort of ionic balance there. But I every week we do water change. All the corals come out every week and get dipped, regardless whether we see issues or not. That's just our routine, very structured. And they, on average, on my 4,000 litres, you get about maybe 600 litres of actual water change. and then about 100 litres a day of water exchange where I'm bagging up and selling corals. So it's kind of almost got a permanent water change on it. But
okay.
not
No, but we're going off topic a little bit. But just one last question on that. Do you dip your corals every week in your shop?
Yes.
All of them? Or most?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Interesting.
I don't. Ryan does.
Well, yeah. I would have thought that that wouldn't be good for them, and it would stress them out, especially if they've just come in. But that's interesting.
I can tell you now that when your corals are looking the best, is when something's lurking.
Right.
We're bringing corals in, and we're bringing inverts in that potentially haven't been quarantined. They have to go through a dip routine, and unfortunately, if you buy one coral and put it in there, the whole lot needs to be dipped, because I don't know if that pest's gone from there to there overnight.
Okay.
You can't single that out. We have got a designated quarantine just for corals over in the unit. It's currently full, and going on to its grow out stage next, which is happy days. But in the shop environment, it doesn't make sense for me to not dip them. The cost of dipping them versus not dipping them far outweighs it. We even have purpose built treatments for our Aquapora, which has been prescribed by a vet. So
you told me about it.
We've done a lot of research, a lot of trial and error, and we've hit the nail on the head now.
Is that a trade secret, or can you say what you use?
I can say what it is. Yeah, I mean, so it's pretty common knowledge anyway, I would have thought. There's a couple of things that I use. So as we know, this is definitely going off topic.
I know. Yeah, sorry, my fault.
So yeah, do you know what? It probably is actually kind of on topic, because, and I should have probably said this before the stage of adding in your first corals, is the whole process of, actually, I believe that a lot of the time when people lose corals is actually because of a pest, not necessarily something that lives on Aquapora, but something around it, whether it be an Aptasia or vermitids, or an absolute pain in the arse. Literally, there's so many different pests out there that all can be eradicated with a bit of love and care when you first buy your coral.
Hello.
I've gone. I've lost me. What's it called, haven't I?
There we stand.
Well, that was a bit embarrassing, wasn't it?
It happens to me. My camera dies half the time, and I'm supposedly professional. But anyway.
I've just got an iPad propped up with something. So, so pests are something you need to learn about very quickly, because there's so many different pests out there, and shop owners across the country are probably going, no, what are you doing? But realistically, there's so many pests out there, and actually, there's one particular view. Actually, there's a couple on here which know exactly what I'm talking about as regards to what's actually out there. And I honestly believe that the more that maricultured corals come on the scene, and the more we demand from it, the more pests we're going to see. So we've got to stay on our toes. We're often taking after we've dipped corals, we'll take a sample of that water and put it under a microscope and actually check for certain things.
Are you talking about Cam? What he had?
Cam's had black bugs. And we did. What are we talking? Let's just see. Okay.
So witch hazel is what, when we started talking about dips, I was thinking, because I've seen witch hazel on your shelf. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Witch hazel's an old school one. Andrew's actually probably somebody that I would particularly get on well with when talking. I've heard through his sort of videos he does, and he talks about using various fish quarantine products which we can't get in this country unless you've got a very friendly vet.
Okay.
And that's the problem, is in this country you've got to know a vet that trusts you. You've got to present them with scientific evidence that this is going to work, and they're not silly. They want to help any animal that they can, whether it be a coral. And it just so happens that the vet near me did some sort of citation or whatever it was, a dissertation, some sort of college degree in microbiology, marine biology, and he was like, "Oh, this is cool. I'll come and have a look." And he come in, had a couple of beers with me. I said, "Look, you know, we found these types of pests. We believe that this is going to work." And he said, "Whatever you are the expert in this. We'll give you the prescription for it." Not going to beat around the bush. It's a product they use for cat worming. And if anybody does want, some information on it, I can't sell it to people. I haven't got a pharmacy license or anything like that. But I can certainly advise people the right things to say to their vet. Because when I first approached my vet, he said, "Well, I need to see the pet," and I said, "You really want me to bring, a coral in here and
put it on a table and like palpate it?"
They hold their hands up. They say, "We don't know what we're dealing with. If you can provide us with some science that ensures us that these animals aren't going to be under any threat from overdose or anything like that," which they're not. One of the active ingredients is praziquantel, I've used it so much in a tank that's got thousands and thousands of pounds worth of SPS in it. They do not bat an eyelid at these types of products. The other one as well, I know a lot of people struggle with torches, and they get a lot of bad press, but if you can get a vet on side, you can get some ciprofloxacin, which is an antibiotic which is designed for getting rid of stomach bugs. The bacteria is called Arcabacteria, or Arcabacter, should I say? And you're looking at sort of like a bit of a lengthy dosage of it. You think, "Oh my God, what am I doing? Am I going to wipe out all these sort of lovely bacterias that I've kind of spent all the money and time building up?" It doesn't do anything. It literally doesn't touch the biology of your tank. If anything, it will help get rid of cyanobacteria. But that is basically it. Trade secrets, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, sorry. That's I asked you a question and we've gone off on a tangent.
Yeah,
but
we have.
That's basically about dipping, which is the message there is it's important to dip.
I will go. I'll be bold and I'll say that if you would like to do another live video at some stage, just on the different types of nasties that are out there, the things that I have come across over the years, I'd be probably stupid to do that, because I think it will. Let's be honest, right? This hobby is all about learning, and for me, unless you're exposed to that knowledge, you're not going to know, are you? You won't know what a Monty nudibranch looks like. You won't know what a Tugastid Monty Poor eating black bug is. There's loads of different pests out there, and you again, I can talk about that for hours. And I think if the guys out there want to hear a video on that, I'll be more than happy to do that. And to be honest, if other shops learn about that as well and actually take on some of the little hints and tips, be my guest. At the end of the day, if it stops us killing corals, and I mean us as in collectively as the hobby, I'm in.
Well, yeah, I'd be up for that. But so in terms of shooting yourself in the foot because you're talking about pests in a shop, I've bought corals from you when you're at the Ocean Project, your current place, from you when you were at Reef Dreams, and before you were at Reef Dreams, from Reef Dreams for years. And I've never found a pest. I've only ever found one pest, which was an enormous flatworm on an acro. I think most sensible people will take comfort from the fact that you treat corals properly and know full well, look, it's a risk, and you want to buy corals from people who try to mitigate risks. But anyway,
exactly.
That's for another stream. But yeah, we'll do that another time.
We've all been into shops, and you're looking for a tank, and you see 90% of the shop, or even 99% of the shop looks fantastic, and in the corner there's an acro stripping. I'm not by any means saying don't buy from them, because things happen.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got this amazing ability of killing like a red dragon, you know, Acro cardius. Don't know what it is. Probably too much light. Definitely doesn't like being dipped. But I have to dip my corals. There's no ifs or buts. That coral's getting dipped.
Interesting. So you will dip. There's nothing that you won't dip, basically, coral wise.
Oh, apart from clams, they get the old toothbrush treatment for like pyramid snails and aptasias and bits of, you know, unwanted algae that grow on there. You know, anything that can be dipped safely gets dipped multiple times and visually inspected. You know, you can't just be a robot. You can't just be doing this. You've got to, and it takes hours. You know, you're looking at a whole day's work to do, you know, a shop, and with a team of people doing it.
But visual inspection, so I don't do this properly, but I should do. Visual inspection isn't just, this is what I do. I look at the frag plug, are there any eggs on it? No, that's all right. You should be having a proper close look with maybe a magnifying glass or something, ideally, to see proper close up.
Absolutely. And, you know, even before you buy it, ask to see the base of the coral. Have a look to see if it's grown over. Some of you may know, all of my acros, the day they come in, before they even touch my system, I cut them straight off the base. Whether they look in absolute, oh, you can't cut that, look how beautiful it is. No, it's getting chopped. It gets cut off the base. That horrible, whatever material that is that they use is some sort of 2-part epoxy, I believe. It smells like chemicals, doesn't smell like something that should go in an aquarium. Often you look on the bases and you'll see like rust stains where they've been tied onto their, they have like iron grids, like frag racks out in the ocean. And none of that stuff, I don't want any of that in my tank. But more importantly, above all of that is, if there's going to be a pest, 9 times out of 10, the eggs or the actual adult will be living in or around that sort of zone where the coral's based out onto its base, onto the plug it's on. One that I've seen over the years and see fairly regularly is one that not many people tend to know about is aquapore-eating snails, which look very similar to dove snails. They've got like a white, very black dotty sort of type shell. Another one as well, which is actually still new to me, was a weird type of sea urchin, which tends to actually eat the underneath of some table acros. Visual inspection, dip, and re-dip. You will not kill your coral if you dip. Even if you dipped your coral 2 or 3 times a week, you're not going to kill it through dipping if you do it the right way, with the right types of dip, by the way, which is reef primer.
So Ian Rodber was saying he likes potassium salts, and I think that's reef primer. I'm going to post a comment that's going to make you feel better. Yeah. Andrew Sounder struggles with red dragon as well.
There you go. Yeah.
Although he's probably got 1,000 butterflies and angels, so you know. But that's probably not it. That's probably not it from the sounds of it.
I don't think there's any. He's got every type of genus in his tank. He's got like everything. Like that tang. What's that tang all about? It's amazing.
That, as much as anything, because the corals were stunning, and that's what we all like in the hobby. But that tank, the fish. Like he had Tinker's butterflies in my chart, or just endless fish that you're like, oh my god, I've only ever seen one of those, and they're just they're all.
And anybody that hasn't sort of looked at his Facebook, I mean, I follow him on Facebook. Awesome music he plays in the background as well. I love it. But he's got such an attention to detail with his quarantine routine. But even still, something got through. You know, he's dosing his system with hydrogen peroxide, I believe, at the moment. You know, you've got to be on your game. So all it takes is for a dirty net from that system into there, or an algae magnet. You know, you've got to be on your game, and that's my responsibility within the shop here. We've got to be absolutely on it at all times. So.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole live stream where we just talk about that tank and the fish and the corals and everything. But anyway, so we'll get back on. We'll get back on topic.
Actually.
Probably should I? Yeah, it would be really good. But anyway, right. So dipping and where were you? You had a list of stuff you want to talk about. So we've done dipping and all that. Where you're at before I interrupted
We've kind of gone well off topic. I mean, I might as well screw my list up because it's completely gone. But throughout this whole process, you know, I believe you should be using the products that are involved in my suit. Do you know what? I've missed out something massively important.
All right.
Phytoplankton.
Okay. Yeah.
So life in the ocean all starts with this bad boy. And yeah, I mean, there's loads of different types of phyto out there. I use the Phytomax from Nios. Keep it in the fridge, really, really concentrated. But that's like, you know, after the first week or so, you can put your phyto in there, keep dosing it every day or two, and actually start, the pods will use that as a food source and multiply like you wouldn't believe. When I did this system here, actually, it was so many pods that they were just free swimming through the water. And I was like, oh, we've got bacterial bloom. And I actually looked a bit closer, and it was just pods swimming. Really, really important to keep those pods up, actually. They do keep away dinoflagellates in the early stages.
Do you know what? I don't know if you saw, and I'll just post this. So Andrew says invite me on. Andrew, I will contact you, because that would be fantastic. I'd love that. So thank you. There was a video this week from Bulk Reef Supply. You're probably not quite such a YouTube nerd as me, but it was.
I do watch a few videos. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I find their latest stuff a bit not as inspiring. It's a bit. It's not reef dork, is it? Let's be honest.
Well, I mean, what is, you know?
Yeah, I know.
But there was a Ryan video this week where he was talking about all cleanup crew and how to deal with algae and outbreaks at the start, and copepods, and they were showing little microscopic videos of copepods eating silica and diatoms and algae and all these sorts of things. And there was a stat, I forget what it was. It was something like a single copepod, and this was a study that someone had done. Single copepod can eat 11,000 diatoms or a day or something like that, something crazy.
That's music to my ears, because I haven't seen that video. I mean, this is all stuff I've done on my own findings, you know.
Yeah, oh, well, there you go. It's from Friday, but yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's all logical stuff. Like, the way that my brain works is, I want to say kind of scientific, but I'm not a scientist as such. I guess I'm a hobbyist scientist.
Yeah, for sure.
But, you know, when it comes to these sorts of things, I just think, well, I need nutrients, so I'll use some reef enhance, because that gives me a bit of phosphate and nitrate, but it's also got microbes in it. Live rock enhance has got probiotics in it, which is good for cleaning pores on porous rocks and bits and bobs.
So I bought this stuff a couple of weeks ago from you when I was in the shop. But so what do these actually? Because they look the same to me, reef enhance and live rock enhance.
Yeah.
But what's the difference? And what do they do?
Basically, with the, which way around should I do this? Okay, live rock enhance for me is probably the most important one out of all of them.
Okay.
Because that's actually going to encourage microbes to actually start living within the aquarium, and having that constant supply in there, constantly being replenished, is going to ultimately just keep it like diverse. If I come into a situation, which most people do, where their nutrients are bottoming out, i.e. their new system is too efficient at breaking down, might be the rock's really porous, or their skimmer's oversized, or they just haven't got enough fish, or they're not feeding the right types of food. That's when I kind of go, and well, I've got the microbes and the bacterias. I need a food to feed them, to keep them happy, so I can stop dinos from taking on. And that's why when I started using the reef enhance, and then I started toying, sort of messing around with bits and bobs and a bit of research. And I watched a video on this Benepets, and you know, Vince at Aquarium Connections has been bringing this stuff in for a few years now. I was actually I was like mesmerised watching the guy talking about, well, it's like ground up insects and stuff.
It was worm food or something, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it started out
as something like that. It was like, I was like, wow, but this stuff genuinely like will reduce your nutrients. So like the probiotics or whatever's in there will actively reduce nutrients. So I started adding all these things together, and I was thinking, bloody hell, this looks like a right old soup, which is why I called it my soup. And obviously adding different bacteria strains throughout this whole process is massively important. We all know I like a Zeobac, because it's got like 12 different strains of bacteria in there. You know, keep it in the fridge and it stays nice and fresh. And that's a good one to add sort of twice a week.
Okay, because that's
yeah.
really interesting. Because it's not normally if I'm putting something like that in my tank, I'm thinking I'm feeding my corals, but actually you're feeding the whole food chain, which is something
The
that we
whole
don't
tank.
think about. Really. Yeah, very
Yeah, yeah.
interesting.
I'm
Okay.
feeding the water. I'm making
Yeah.
sure everything's happy, not just my corals. As a result, if you mixed all of that up, even with the zeobac, even with the nitrobiotic, even with the phytoplankton, you know, you could mix that up into a big soup, leave it for 2 hours to sit there and mature. It's a bit of an old school thing we used to do with some like KZ products. Let it all absorb water in, become hydrated, maybe even start the process of hatching. Just building it up ready. You can get a turkey baster or one of these feeding pipettes used for feeding corals, turn your flow off and just baste them with it. Oh my God, the reaction. Like, they love that
Okay.
stuff. 90% of our corals are eating bacteria is their main method of nutrient export. They're eating bacteria that have ingested phosphate and nitrate, and they're transporting that into their bodies. And that's ultimately the whole aim of this goal is we're trying to transport those nutrients inside the coral somehow, but we need those nutrients there to begin with.
Okay, so I think I might have taken you off on a tangent again.
Yeah, you did.
But you started talking about you were chucking these in and that. So sorry,
Yes.
my
So
apologies.
yeah, okay. So I'm going to touch on something now because everyone's probably still thinking, "Oh my God, this guy's a lunatic," and all his customers must have hair algae everywhere on their tanks. There are certain situations where people, it doesn't work for people for whatever reason. Normally that they've missed a stage out or they haven't put enough fish in there, and they do end up with dinos, and they come back and they say, "Well, okay, what do I do? I've got dinos." Well, these products do 100% work if they're used and applied correctly. But if you say we're having persistent issues or your phosphate levels are going too high, then you might want to use some sort of phosphate remover. I don't really see there any need to, certainly within the first year, to ever remove nitrates unless they were like silly high. And I've heard numbers of people say, "Oh, my nitrates are 50," and you test it with our shop test kits and it's actually 12. So decent test kits are very important.
Okay.
There's a lot of inaccuracy, and you can be thrown out by potentially inferior test kits, I guess what I'm trying to say. But the initial reaction if you've got really high phosphates is to chuck a load of GFO in there. One very popular brand in the UK certainly is Rowaphos, which is a seemingly virgin product. Well, I've got 4,000 litres, and if I put 4 heaped tablespoons in my system, it reduces my phosphate too much, and then I'm in crisis. Then, "Ryan, what have you done? You've put too much Rowaphos in my tank." Well, thinking about it, Rowaphos is very, very contains very fine particulates, and fine particulates have a hell of a lot more surface area than a larger grain. We made the swap basically over to the NIOS PhosX. Don't know if you'll hear it, but
Yeah, can hear it.
they're actually bigger granules, and
Oh, is that still GFO?
yeah, it's still GFO,
Okay.
and it's got a larger granule. So basically, it works less efficiently, but it works for longer, and that's kind of what I want. I was thinking, right, I don't want to have my phosphates up here and then suddenly they dive down and then they start coming up again. I want my phosphates to kind of, be on an even, a gentle sort of sweeping swing rather than a up down. And the NIOS PhosX has given us exactly that. We can tailor our system now depending on how many nutrients we want to keep in the system. I'm not going to lie, 0.25, which we had a few weeks ago, is a bit too high. We put a little bit in there and brought it down to sort of 0.15. You were in not that long ago, and the coral was looking banging.
Because with the Fuzzy X stuff, I've looked before for something that removes phosphate more gently, and there's the aluminium based products. I can't remember what they're called, but they're not as effective.
Yeah, so you've got aluminium oxide, which is
Yeah.
you've got AL99, which is a Triton one. You've got Seachem. What's that one called? Not Purigen. Yeah, it's the one by Seachem.
Yeah.
Phosguard. Yeah, and there's various other ones, and I dare say that there's a product I believe that Claude from Fauna Marine sells. Is it Phosphate 0.03, something like that?
Okay.
It only brings it down to that particular level, and the aluminium ones are great for removing phosphate, but they do start to build up a bit of aluminium contamination in your water, which weirdly and coincidentally is removed by it. Yeah, so
doesn't the aluminium stuff remove iron?
Yes, it does.
It's leached by Rofoss. So yeah,
exactly that. So it's kind of like, why aren't we all mixing it? But
yin and yang. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So
sorry. Anyway, again, I interrupted you. So Fozzie X, you were talking about.
I'm starting to think actually it's you that makes me go off on tangents.
It's completely my fault. There are just some things that are really interesting that you just say, and I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, do you know what? Let's talk about that for 2 hours.
Fall for it every time.
I know. Yeah.
I don't even know where I was at now.
You were talking about phosphate.
Yes, so phosphate removers, and I wanted to touch on. Personally, I'm not a fond user of like lanthanum chlorides.
No.
If I was going to use one, I probably wouldn't use Agent Green. I've had a bad experience with that one, but the TMC one's all right. For gentle use.
Short term.
Yeah. Yes and no. I've heard mixed reviews. Some people have got it on dosing pumps, and they've got it dosing into their skimmer, and then the outlet of the skimmer goes into a filter sock, and it's like a proper system. But for the average user, I just get a phosphate reactor and go very light with the phosphate remover. I don't think you have to have zero phosphates or very low phosphates. It's just not. It's old. It's too old. That technology's gone. That understanding is gone. We like to use strong, harsh LEDs, which are putting our corals under extreme amount of stress just to be able to put up this sunscreen. And phosphates and nitrates are there to provide that energy. Amino acids as well. So I would say any sort of reef, generally speaking, I would say that you wouldn't really want to put a refugium on until after the first month or so. First year. And I would normally associate the refugium with nutrient export, but I wouldn't really want to use it for that. So I wouldn't necessarily have a massive refugium, but I'd actually have a smaller, more manageable refugium that I could light more aggressively or less aggressively, depending on what my nutrients were doing. And the aim of the refugium for me, and what I normally say to people to have one for, is for pH gains. The whole water chemistry thing, which we are in fear of going down a rabbit hole again, but the chemistry side of it is so important, and I don't think necessarily chasing numbers is the right way, but maintaining natural seawater levels as far as alkalinity, calcium, magnesium is very important, and keeping your pH as stable and as high as you can. No, I'm not going to say that, because we'll have someone out there going, I've got 9.
Yeah.
But yeah, 8.2, 8.4, anywhere around there, and as small a swing as possible, and you're going to have as good growing acros as I have. They're not by any means in a stable environment in here, but there's certainly some rules that I adhere to. And as I said to you earlier before the live stream started, my phone was pinging right at the end of the photo period on our lights. My pH was 8.6. What more do you want? So yeah, I guess that's kind of realistically from day one up to 1 year of how to set up an SPS tank.
So I've got a question on the point of pH, which I'll ask in a second. But Hugo Tate has given a super chat. Thank you, Hugo. And he says, what do you think about UV and phyto?
UV and phyto. UV, I actually don't really like using UV too much, not on coral system anyway. Fish system's an essential piece of equipment. But there are circumstances, if people are experiencing problems with dinoflagellates or some sort of algae blooms. I mean, I genuinely, in the first week of me setting up these systems here, the water you couldn't see through because it was that green with phyto. I was actually using the it's gone out of my mind, the Easy Booster, which is a bottled phyto in suspension, but if you put it in water, it reactivates and comes back alive.
Is that so? Because on the point of UV with phyto, UV sterilizes things. It doesn't kill them; it sterilizes things.
Yeah, it
so
stops it from being able to repair its cells, but it still does have an effect on it, and it will flocculate or bind together particulates that you can't really see with the naked eye, but appears as a cloud.
So it could still harm phyto theoretically, but
yeah, it will kill it. It will. I mean, we know the effects of UV on a green stagnant pond for koi. You know, every spring, everyone's rushing down to Maidenhead Aquatics to buy their UV bulbs. You know, because that's that time of year. But on a reef tank, it will and have a purpose. You know, especially on deeper aquariums where you're potentially losing par through sort of tannings in the water, and that will keep your water crystal clear, will reduce pathogens down 100%, will reduce sort of pest algae as well. But you know, for me, I like to keep it natural. There's always something in the ocean bigger and more intelligent to eat something else, and it's just finding out what those are, and I believe I've found the answer. Certainly works for me and my customers.
And Ian Rodber's quoting David Saxby, "We keep water, not animals."
Yes, that is very, very true. Absolutely.
So I think you were about to say that you're finishing, which means I can ask another question and talk about something else.
I think realistically, like without me going on tangents, what I'm looking for is a way of me finishing this so you can ask me a question which allows me to talk more.
Well, you've done that because you got to the point a second ago, and I reminded myself to ask Hugo's question. But so you talked about your pH of 8.6. What more do you want? That's great. And the question I was going to ask you is on this system, that this hypothetical how to set up a SPS tank, are you running Kalkwasser?
100%.
Yeah.
So there's loads of methods in which to maintain minerals within the water. Kalkwasser, I mean, why did it suddenly become popular again? I've always used it on all of my tanks, and I was actually using it wrong. Like years ago, I was using it wrong. God knows, if I had some sort of aquarium controller on there, I wouldn't even like to think what my pH and alkalinity was doing, because I was dosing it only at night, but all of my auto top up was going through that. I must have had huge fluctuations in pH and alkalinity. I think it's a massive edge for anybody's reef tank. Now, there is actually the odd exception, and I can't for the life of me remember which company is that makes this product. It's a two-part
Reef's Elements.
Reef's Elements.
Plus.
I had a chap in yesterday. He travelled quite a long way down from London, the sort of Essex area, and he was saying that he looked on his phone. Obviously, he had some sort of controller or monitor, and his pH was really high, and he was dosing calc and that, and I was like, whoa, that's quite extreme. I mean, early days for him on his tank using that product. If you're really struggling with low pH, and that, if you've got a lot of animals, pets in the house, or a family household, that might actually be a game changer for people that are struggling with really genuinely low pH. So yeah, that's quite. I definitely would advise doing a Kalkwasser
Yeah,
on any
and
tank.
for sure. And you said, why has it gone away? My impression is that it never went away in America, and because whenever I talk to someone stateside, they're like, I'm using it. Everybody uses it over here, but over here, it for whatever reason it disappeared. Because I until recently, I didn't know anybody apart from you and one or two other people on Ultimate Reef who use Kalkwasser. And every time I go into a shop and say, "What about Kalkwasser?" they're like, "Nah, no one wants it."
Yeah, but I think you look at the stuff. It's probably the initial setup costs, right? But then it doesn't even have to be that expensive.
Yeah, so it doesn't at all. The only expense on my setup, because I just dose saturated calc, I don't have a calc stirrer.
Yeah.
I've just got a dosing pump, continuous duty dosing pump.
So
they're a bit more expensive than a normal one, but they're cheaper than three dosing pumps.
Yeah, I mean you've got a continuous duty cycle one, but I run mine off of the DOS, the Neptune DOS pumps, which I believe can be used as a continuous duty, possibly not. Mine doesn't. Mine doses once every 15 minutes, and it pours in. It goes in. So anyone that you could or does want to use Kalkwasser with either this fully saturated like yourself, or with a calc stirrer, just because you haven't got a continuous duty cycle stepper motor type dosing pump, you don't have to have that. I think it's cool knowing that you're dosing like 1 mil a minute or whatever, but actually if we're trying to gain pH gains, this is what I was saying earlier about this programming with the Apex to control it so it only goes up to 8.3. You can easily get saturated calc to make your pH go up to 8.3. It's how do you control it? And for me, having a larger dose kind of not infrequently, because every 15 minutes, but like a continuous drip isn't going to have as much of an effect as like a glug. It's going to have a big effect on that, and it kind of does show on my pH graphs, as you can see, certainly in the early hours of the photo period when the lights first come on. The corals are starting to photosynthesize, and you see all the graph just like rockets up. It's incredible.
Okay, so and there's a few people liking Kalkwasser in the chat as well. So I mean pH is another thing, and I've talked to you about pH before, and because pH has been a part of the conversation certainly on YouTube for a couple of years, and Chris Meckley, ASI Aquaculture, I think he kind of started pushing it, and others as well, BRS and some others. And what are you getting by elevating your pH to, within reason? What are you getting from avoiding low pH? Growth and polyp extension?
Realistically, what we're aiming to do, and I don't necessarily think it's particularly about pH so much. I think it's actually more about pushing out as much carbon dioxide as possible.
Right. Okay.
So like I said, I keep going back to it, but it was a very successful tank. My successful tank had a pH of 7.8. It was having a calcium reactor, which was chuffing loads of carbonic acid in there. I was running Kalkwasser, but even still with that, I barely made 8 pH. I think realistically, as long as you're pushing and driving out the CO2 and increasing oxygen and subsequently pH, I think realistically that's just going to absolutely increase calcification tenfold. Calcareous algae, like coralline algae, just grows annoyingly everywhere so fast. Big thick plates of it. The system, for me, you can tell a tank that's been run on Kalkwasser. You can tell how healthy all of the calcareous animals are. They're just really strong, dense bone structures. There's a lot to be said for it, and for something that's so cheap to use as well, it's like a no-brainer. If you take out calc stirrers, that is. But...
Yeah, 400 quid Deltec.
Yeah,
which
literally.
Seems to be the only one. Yeah, but
yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's basically follow that. Watch this video back, hour and 3/4, and you've got a banging Acro tank.
Yeah, basically. And again, I'm going to apologise for rabbiting on about certain things. But genuinely, if anybody does want a bare bones, no messing around, no waffling, step-by-step guide, I do actually offer that service to customers as well. You know, and alternatively, I do house call consultations as well. So there's so much information out there for people that I would love to give everybody that information, whoever they are. It's all about progression within the hobby, keeping the hobby trend, you know, as popular as possible, and keep moving forward and learning more.
Do you know what? There's something else I'm going to try to find if I can work out a search. Here we go. Something else I'll post as well for you, and this will hopefully reduce the number of phone calls you get. And this is, so if you go onto the Ocean Project Facebook page and you search for the word soup, you will scroll down a couple of bits and you will find this 30-minute video, and this talks about your souping method. I watched this the other day, and it's quite expensive, to be fair. It was I spent I think 120 quid, and I had the Benepets, which was 30 quid. So you'll spend a lot of money, but it's a guide on how to mature live rock, dead rock. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right, and yeah, it really does work. It's not a plug to buy all those free products. Somebody may turn around in the future and say, do you know what, Benepets and Reef Enhance are the same product, different packaging. They're not, but you know, someone could say that. Whatever it is in those, that combination really does work. That's it, really.
Yeah.
What more can I say about it?
There was a question. This may be something you know about. May I ask Acro Man when I can go to the lake? Is this a fishing reference?
I would chew my right arm off to be going fishing anytime soon. But
okay.
as I will point out towards the end of the video or film, whenever this is, I haven't really got the time at the moment, mate. But if you want to come up in an evening and we can have a little scoot round, then be my guest, and we'll see if we can take a little snidey rod and see if we can catch a couple of carp.
And Dean Fielding is asking if there's a way to measure CO2 in the water. Effectively, in a roundabout way, that's what pH is.
It pretty much, yeah.
Lower CO2 is higher pH.
That's correct. You can buy CO. I think Mike Paletta had a CO2 monitor for his room. And he had. I mean, I don't even really know much about the CO2, so I can't really comment too much. But there are ways of measuring what an acceptable level of CO2 in the surrounding area is. And we know when the doors and windows are closed during the winter, our pH crashes, like mine does. I've got a CO2 scrubber, you know, permanently plugged in the winter, not so much in the summer, but.
Okay, and so if there's I was in a restaurant in Spain last year, I can't remember when it was, and they had a little CO2 monitor on the desk, but that's for air. I don't know about water, but yeah. Anyway,
you can definitely get an oxygen sensor for Neptune if you've got a spare grand laying around.
Doesn't the Senai measure dissolved oxygen? Senai Reef. I don't know how accurate it is. I'm pretty sure it does.
No, because that's not an actual Senai, that's a web server.
Oh, right, okay. I'm pretty sure it does. I don't know. I'm not. I like the Senai for measuring par, not a massive amount now. So the app's really clunky, but I don't know how accurate it is. But
who cares how accurate something like that is? Or what are they, 100 quid, something like that?
Yeah.
You know, for something that gives you peace of mind when you go on holiday, even if the readings are actually incorrect, as long as you can build data and get a trend. If something goes wrong, wonky, you can phone up the neighbour and say, do you know what, I think there might be a power cut or whatever. Okay. It could save your tank.
Fair enough. All right, I think we might have reached the end. Actually, no, that's not quite true. So before I ask you if there's anything else you want to talk about, you mentioned at the start of this video that the Ocean Project, so this is going to be a plug. The Ocean Project is coming up to a year old, and you're doing a week-long event, right? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so in August, so the August the 7th officially was our opening day last year. So this year, for our 1 year anniversary, we are going to do 6-day long event, which is going to be our anniversary event. So from Tuesday the 2nd of August to Sunday the 7th, we will be, well, what will we be doing? So we've got a different, well, the option is basically 2 different reps every day, exhibitioning new products. The likes of D&D are going to be there. We've got we've got Exodus, Jim. Every rep you could think of is coming down. I think there was even mentioned possibly Mr. Saxby was coming down, which would be pretty cool. So I've never actually met the guy. We met at Coral Freaks. Didn't really sort of spend much time talking to him, but I'd like to have a chat with him. To be honest, he's obviously very knowledgeable. Yeah, so obviously there's going to be lots of special offers, raffles. There's honestly, the list is so big that I'm actually going to cut it a little bit short on me waffling on it, because I'm not really selling it. But we have got very shortly coming a leaflet flyer that will be published on all the social media platforms, as well as email addresses for any of our customers that do have an account with us. So you will be first to know, especially on our Facebook WYSIWYG page as well. You'll be first to know the list of prizes to be won, the deals, the corals. Like literally, you cannot fit any more corals in here at the moment. And people are like, well, could you get any more corals? And they don't realise that we've got more over at the unit as well as backup. The shop is rammed, and will continue to be rammed throughout the duration. We've got just something to note that we've got Kurt from World Fauna. He's actually coming down and bringing a selection of really high-end corals, specifically to showcase these one of a kind corals just for us. You know, that we're going to set up a tank just for those, just for his corals. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. Massively stressful though. You know, trying to sort of get everything all sort of working together and nice. But I appreciate you kind of giving me the opportunity to sort of spread the word out on here.
Yeah.
For me, it's a massive achievement for this 1 year mark, and we have been so successful in such a short period of time, and that is ultimately down to everybody, all of my customers, anybody that supports us. You know, thank you very much. Like literally, I'm so happy. It's unbelievable.
A lot of it, I think it's fair to say, is down to you, Shaun, to be fair.
No,
and your staff. Well, anyway, you're being too modest. Come on.
No, but you know, it boils down to, at the end of the day, customers are happy, aren't they? And you know, I waffle on. I can't get my words out sometimes, but at the end of the day, I'm just like everybody else, and I like talking about geeky fish tank stuff. You know, it is what it is. I will always enjoy doing it. It's what I was born to do.
Indeed. And this isn't a sponsor video, it's just I like the shop, so
and I did offer.
Yeah. Anyway, so is there any do you have any closing thoughts on Acros and keeping SPS, setting up an SPS tank?
I would say with Acros is what would I say about Acros? Always buy from a reputable seller that clearly has given love to these corals. I wouldn't buy a coral that's just come in fresh, per se. I mean, some of the Aussie stuff does all right, but it's very few and far between. But just, you know, I think you said before on one of the videos about copper band, you know, you went back and a couple of weeks and having a look, just, you know, or, you know, he's feeding this week or he wasn't last week. You know, it doesn't matter what coral you've got. You know, don't get me wrong. There's some corals out there which are absolutely one of a kind. You've seen one of them in my shop here. But you know, there are corals, multiples of them, and the hobby is always evolving. It might be a gold torch this month. It might be a home wrecker next month. All I'm saying is, if you've got your heart set on particular types of corals, don't just go and buy it because it's called something. Have a look at it, make sure it looks healthy, even if you don't really know what you're looking for, take a photo of it and send it to someone that might know what it is and whether it is healthy, and say, what does this look like? Not talking about price or anything else. Something's only worth what somebody's realistically willing to pay. But if the coral's been looked after well and the quality shows, then go for it. Regardless of money wise, it is what it is.
And the coral you're talking about, this was at, I've got a video that I took when you and Eddie were in the shop. This was at Reef Dreams. So this wasn't your shop, but this was at Reef Dreams in Totton.
That's it.
Winchester as it was, which is another excellent shop on the south coast. And that's it. I mean,
it is incredible. To be fair, that is. And you know what? Like, I don't even think that was without a filter.
No, that was with a filter. That was my phone. Or
Are
was
you sure?
it?
Because
I'm pretty sure.
my hand is.
I'm pretty sure that was with an orange filter. I'm almost certain it was. I think you gave me a DD orange filter.
I think I might have done. Yeah, the clip-on lens one. Yeah, I think you're right.
Because if I were to wind, there we go. I mean, but if I were to wind forward, there you go. So there were others as well.
Yeah, true.
But it is. It's nice coral anyway.
Yeah, hands down. Those types of corals they come around very, very, very rarely. But even still, I'm not selfish in the sense that I'm not going to sell something like that. I want to keep the lineage. I'll keep a frag for myself, and I'll sell it on to other people, which I have done. I've sold a couple of frags of that coral, so I know that if I do kill it, I know there is some out there, which is the main thing, And the other thing as well, I suppose, with with the success and stuff with SPS tanks is, don't be afraid to go back to your local fish shop and offer them some frags and ask for credit. I mean, this ultimately is how I started business years ago, by going into shops and saying, look, I've got 20 frags of tricolour Acro, they're all based out, I want a 5 or 4 each of them or something like that, and just see what you get, because I'm not saying, and I know this was a bit of a was it one of those controversial videos, and we were sort of having a chat and a bit of banter, but at the end of the day, those corals that might be throwaway corals to somebody that's been doing it for years are somebody's pride and joy for their first ever saltwater tank, maybe. And those types of corals would cost a lot of money from a supplier for what is effectively a £5 or a £10 coral, to us. So I think just
you need to be careful what you're inviting there, because I've got a million frags of Tropic Thunder Monty. I'm going to bring them down to your shop next time.
I've got enough of that, actually.
Exactly.
Maybe take it to Reef Dreams.
Yeah, I can't sell it anywhere. There was a time it's a really nice coral, and there was a time when I'd take it to Reef Keeper Moss End, my local shop, and they would sell the frags for 60 quid, sort of that size, and I'd get 20 quid for them, and I was happy with that.
Happy days,
it's anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. So those are your last words of wisdom. So we'll wrap up in that case.
Unless anybody's got any questions, of course.
I've probably missed. I've not been very good with the chat today. I've definitely missed some questions, but I think I think we've covered. I've had too many questions, and if I was pulling in questions all the time, we'd have been here for 7 hours. So
literally, full working day.
Indeed. But thank you very much for coming on, Shaun.
It's my pleasure, mate. I kind of feel a little bit more settled on this one. I'm not so nerve-wracked, but and I do aim to do potentially my own YouTube video. I've kind of been put back a little bit with the progress on it, but so this is something that I kind of would like to do a bit more often, whether it's with you guys or anybody else, any other YouTubers. But keep going, and I enjoy watching your videos as much as kind of being on them. It's like always learning and seeing other people's sort of opinions and whatever else.
Indeed. Well, yeah, there are some really other good channels, particularly that do live streams. Certainly in America as well. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's it's not for me to invite you onto other people's live streams, but it'd be cool.
Right.
We'll get you back at another point to talk about one of a million other subjects. So
Different species of copepods for 2 hours.
yeah, all right, I'll be up for that. But anyway, right, so I'll wrap up now, but thank you very much everybody for watching and for contributing, and I will see you all next week. Cheers guys.
Thanks guys, see you later.